My niche is to provide the compassionate care and provide the excellent clinical and functional outcomes. I try to help children with all congenital neurological anomalies.
Hello, and welcome to the fourth episode of the second series of Chicago Dialogues. As you know, this is a series that is produced by the University of Chicago Center in Delhi in collaboration with Prohor.in. Avik Chanda, who is the anchor for this series, a well-known writer, poet, entrepreneur, unfortunately is a little indisposed and may not be doing most of the talking today. I'll probably have to take his place. I am Dipesh Chakrabarty. I'm a professor of history and South Asian languages and civilizations at the University of Chicago. And our guest today is Professor Mohan Gundeti, a very dear and esteemed colleague, world-famous surgeon, a pioneer, actually, of robotic surgery for urological problem in children and babies. And he heads up the Pediatric Urology Center in our children's hospital on campus. But Mohan is also an educator. His own life story is fascinating. So today we invited Mohan to discuss his journey, his life story, his experience as a surgeon, his experience as an educator, and Mohan actually is also, I look on him as a figure of inspiration for others. He is not only a wonderful person, a wonderful surgeon, he is, if I may say it with a sense of humor, a fitness fanatic, but he's not a fitness fanatic. He's known for lazy Bengalis like me. He's an amazing person. He's a marathon runner, in addition to being a surgeon. But I don't think his devotion to fitness is unconnected to his profession. So with that, Mohan, welcome to the series. It's our privilege and pleasure to have you with us. And I thought, Mohan, the arc I thought we might follow for our discussion is maybe by asking you to say a little bit about your journey from school onwards. When did you decide to become a doctor? What made you decide to become a doctor? What made you become a pediatric urological surgeon? Then we'll talk about the techniques, the surgery you have. We might talk about people who have inspired you along the way. I have some questions about Indian doctors coming to the US. You know, we hear a lot about Indian academics coming to the US. We hear a lot about, particularly in the Indian techies, information science people coming to the US. We know that the Silicon Valley has a lot of Indian and subcontinental entrepreneurs and skilled people, but there's not so much talk about Indian medical specialists coming to this country. But even in Illinois, 30% or 40% of the doctors are of South Asian background, from what I gather. So we might also ask you some questions about that. I thought it would be fascinating to maybe ask you about your experience of a difficult surgery,
Yeah.
or maybe the first time when you became a surgeon. When you looked inside a human body and tried to do something. I've read hair-raising accounts of people training to be surgeons and not on their first day not being able to find the organ they were looking for inside the body. But anyway, lots to talk about. Mohan, so we'll begin by asking you about your journey, maybe how you came to be a doctor, your background. I personally have found your background fascinating. I'm sure uh, the people who are watching this program will also do.
So, first of all, Dipesh, thank you. And Avik, I'm really humbled and honored. And I'm very happy to share the journey. I'm sure, many others have similar stories. We may be part of this journey as well. But also, I'm really proud to be associated and fortunate to work with the University of Chicago, which is a home to more than 100 Nobel Prize winners and distinguished people like you, distinguished people like Avik. This makes the story more interesting and also the place more intriguing. Before I start, I want to say thank you to not only University of Chicago, but the center in Delhi and all the people who have put forward and worked behind the screen what we are presenting today. It's immense work. So first of all, a big thank you and applause to all of them. And also, I'm here the face of sharing the story, but there are innumerable family members, friends, well-wishers, mentors, teachers who have spent their life for me what I am to be here. And I think, I owe all of them, my creators, my parents, my grandparents, my family members, my dear wife, my children, my brothers, sisters, so innumerable. So, with saying that big thank you, I want to just start little bit of journey to share with you. Thank you again. I'm really humbled and honored.
Our pleasure. And yeah, our honor too. We're honored to have you.
So, first of all, the story beginning, means we don't have a big generational story to share with. And as I was discussing, one of the day with you, my grandfather was an orphan, and he was about to be sold to someone in the village just because being an orphan, the caretakers were not able to sustain the financial impact of my grandfather, who was, I don't know the age, very, very early childhood. And it was his maternal cousin who said, no, we're not doing this.
Mohan, where was this?
This is Andhra Pradesh,
Right.
in a small village of Karimnagar. And again, means small village, we don't know about his parents, and probably they must have lost their life probably in one of the communicable disease spread. And he was the only child. I think we remember what he said. And then he had a cousin brother. So one of his cousin aunt, she said, this is not going to happen. We're going to take him and we're going to raise him in our family. And this single person who is near and dear to my heart for all the important values he embodied as a simple manual worker. And then he made his journey. He had a little bit of help from his cousin brothers, and with a lot of trouble in pre-independent era, he moved to place Solapur in Maharashtra, looking for bread to win to survive. And this is where our journey starts. So this is such a young journey story. And then he got married, and it is my grandmom who was instrumental in changing our field from a manual laborer to education. And my father is the first person in the family to go to school. And it was all instrumental because of my grandmother. And my dad, who started education in the family, and he used to study and work, and he became a primary school teacher after passing seventh grade or eighth grade. And this is where our humble story begins.
So, Mohan, if I may just interrupt you for a moment. So, from what you told me once, which I found fascinating, this Padmashali community that you belong to, it's a community of weavers. So, you don't actually have a memory of anybody weaving in the family.
I do have a
I mean, you don't know any ancestor who actually was.
So actually, I have a very good memory because my grandfather used to make saris. He used to weave a sari. He never had his
I see.
own, but he used to go to somebody's place to work from morning to evening. And my time to spend with him was when he was weaving these saris. After I come back from school, or if I'm not well from school, I will go and sit with him because that's what the
I see.
caretaking was. But later on, I saw my grandparents from my mother's side, they actually owned it, the factory
Oh,
to make the saris. And later on, again, Lalita, my dear wife, her parents also owned the sari, making small, small scale stuff. But my grandfather used to work for someone from morning to evening, and he wanted my dad to do the same thing. But my grandmother, who we all owe to for education, she said, no, this boy is brilliant, and with his friends and everything, he's going to go to school. And my dad became a school teacher.
I
So
see.
this is where our education series begin in the family.
And you, and this is all in Sholapur. So you're growing up. You were born in Sholapur.
Correct. I was born in Solapur. This is all in, I was born and brought up in Solapur. And I spent the time in early childhood in a very, I will say, very different language speaking people in a small neighborhood, which is considered as a neighborhood which needs a lot of help.
Right.
Probably I could say, just similar to our, some of the small cities outside Chicago we have. And we grew up in that place. We have multi-language speaking people outside, Urdu, Kannada, Marathi, and it's a small neighborhood, but the people in the neighborhood are mainly, daily wage workers. And my dad probably was only person in that whole neighborhood who was like a school teacher. And he was very insistent that education has to be there. So everybody respected when he come in a bicycle, coming on a bicycle into the neighborhood saying that, oh, teacher came. And he was always used to say, Gundeti teacher, Gundeti teacher. And everybody was little bit, like they will behave well because, my dad is a teacher. And he had embodied, all those values as a teacher.
And you grew up speaking Telugu at home and Marathi outside, or
So yes, Telugu at home, and then outside we have to speak Marathi in school. But in the neighborhood we grew up, we have to do Kannada and also Hindi.
wow,
Urdu is not possible. Means we could have spoken, but Hindi.
this is India, which is always multilingual.
This is always India, and
Dipishna,
Oh, we has
Dipishna, I just wanted to come in.
yeah,
Dipishna, I wanted to come in
sure,
for a minute, if I may.
yeah,
Professor
absolutely.
Gundeti, you talked about your father, right, riding to school on that bicycle, and I'm thinking whether those childhood memories, right, humble as your surroundings were, the kind of respect that your father got because he was a school teacher, because he was an educationist, did that subliminally, remain with you throughout your life? And much later, when you became an educationist yourself and started giving back to the world, how much of a factor was that for that, germ in your childhood?
see, I think probably as growing up, you don't remember, what every person in the family or community is sharing their reflection on you. either just by seeing you, or just discussing with you or sharing with you. And I think you're absolutely right, Avik. Probably his stature as a teacher coming into neighborhood, on a bicycle, and then what the teacher can be counted as in the community. I think definitely, probably later on, it was an indirect influence, and then it slowly grows up in you, even though you didn't thought about it, you didn't probably put on that you. And similarly, again, my grandfather, he always, like, only he will talk to people who are really, like, means very true to values, and very true on in the in front, you know and always honest, always ethical. So these all things, I think, these are small acts, but the small acts making together makes a big influence on you, and which does reflect on you in the later life.
And Mohan, when you went to school, did your background put you at a disadvantage? Was your background a problem in school?
So, growing up with three brothers, and we were very close. My two younger brothers, and I have two sisters, older sister and younger sister. But somehow, older sister went to different school, and then we three also went to different school. But we were very tight. So the initial school I was in a municipal corporation school, like a public school.
Yeah.
I was very well, received. My dad was in the same school, and I was scoring very well. But probably, I think my dad realized that this is disadvantage to me being in the same school. Probably, people may think that he's Dr. Sir Gundeti sir's son, and he realized that this kid should go out somewhere. And I was put to a elite school in Solapur, which is called as Haribai Devkaran School, which is a Marathi medium school. And that school was so far away from our home. And how I got exposed to that school was I did like a scholarship exam when I was in grade 4. And around that time, that teacher suggested to my dad, I think you should think about your son changing your school. So when I went to this new school, I still have a fresh memory the first day of the school. And it was like probably 2.5 kilometers from home. And, my mom used to make bidis. And she's, again, a daily worker. Everybody in the family worked. So my dad draw a design saying that, this is how you're going to go to school. This is the time you're at the school. And I could be there probably 10 to 12 before I go to school. But if you miss that window, then you have to go to school on your own. So I went to school on first day. I missed that window, and somehow I figured it out little half an hour late. I went to school. I went to admission office, and the school was humongous, huge school. I was completely lost. Then I made entry into the class, and the class, everybody laughed at me because, maybe, I was late, I may have been, different attire, whatever it is. And it was tough. It was tough getting adjusted to this big school of a different backgrounds of the people coming from the Solapur city. The amount of work you have to do to get adjusted in the school was immense. But I will tell you, that school, I'm so fortunate of whatever things I learned as a student. And I'm so fortunate and blessed and happy that my dad took that decision. Today, what I am is probably part of because of that school where I learned the resilience to adapt to make, talk to people, to get adjusted, and it was a groundbreaking in the future journey.
And where you, Mohan, because you said it was an elite school, So I assume that most of the students came from well-to-do families and background, and you would have been a minority. Would have been a minority of students coming from less privileged background.
Yes, indeed. All the parents were doctors, engineers, lawyers, businessmen, corporate offices, government officials, and I was always on the back bench, and I was always in the back of the class and the school. And you could imagine it was tough.
But you told me there was a very interesting story of you moving to the front benches.
Yes.
You want to share it? I thought it was such an inspiring story.
So, so I think, probably I didn't adjust well in the school. It was tough. And, probably then a couple of our friends, together, maybe we're doing mischiefs. And so someday, one of the teacher got, said, no, this is not right. I think the best thing is we should bring you guys to front and sit in the front so that at least we can watch on you, what you guys doing it, and, how you can do it. And hopefully that will help. And I'm so thankful for teacher. And we came to front bench, and then things evolved, things change. We got into more intense into studies, and then just the flag took off from there, and it was never ending and never stopping.
But your performance must have also helped you.
True. I think, around the same time, we, as I said, the family situation and commitment teaches you a lot of things. I think the circumstances is the best teacher of you. And looking at the circumstances of the family, what we're going through, there is no other mean. I think if we don't get educated well, if we don't work hard, I think how are you going to sustain it? How are you going to survive it? How are you going to make, anything you can do in your life? So it hit hard. And probably, I think, by the time like 8th grade starting, the performance really jumped up, 8th, 9th, and 10th grade. So I think the difficult years were 5 and 6 and 7th grades. And I will say, retrospectively looking back, everybody goes through some sort of this thing, and it is important and it is must. Now I'm looking at is, the amount of failures, the amount of rejections, the amount of adversities. I think these are all important lessons, and probably, reflecting back, I think they were really like a vaccination for future diseases I have to combat on.
We will come back to the topic of vaccinations. It's one of the most important topics of conversation these days. But Mohan, so how does a child from that kind of background decide to study medicine?
So, probably didn't know anything around that time in the school, what you want to be, just get a good grades, move on, get to something future, do something better. And I think I used to accompany my grandfather from grade 4th, because my grandfather used to get small illnesses here and there. Everybody was fit in the family, everybody was fit. So I used to accompany him, and the number of times I accompanied, I used to really see this doctor, who will come out, he will talk to the patients, and the whole aura of that person taking care of human being in suffering. I think probably it, really kicked in me very well. But at the same time, my grandfather was not happy. He said, every time I have to go to doctor, I have to wait for an hour, then, another hour. So 2 hours. Why can't you become a doctor and take care of me? So those 2 hours I could work, and, I could earn something to feed family or to help family, because, apart from working, he used to help in the house. My mom, dad both work. So he used to do all the stuff for us. So that inspired a lot. But eventually things moved on. What things moved on is my maternal aunt passed away with communicable diseases at the early 30 age. And then my mom, my dad, later on again got ill for a short time. And these really embodied me well. And when around 1986, I did my 12th standard, it was difficult work, studying and hard, get into medical school. So I said, I told my grandfather that I will become a doctor. And I always told everyone that, now I want to become a doctor from early age. And it all happened in 1986 when I did medical 12th standard. My grandfather was not really well. He was almost on deathbed. And the day later came in that I got admitted to medical school. He was on a deathbed. And I shared with him that, I got into medical school. And around that next day, he became no more. So that totally embodied me that I have to become a doctor. There's no other.
He's clearly an inspirational figure in this story, your grandfather. But Mohan, I'm just looking at the time, so moving a little forward in terms of life story. Tell us about, you obviously went through medical training, and you have to, all medical trainees eventually choose in fields to specialize in. And I know that from India you went to England for, was it in England that you found your vocation in pediatric urological surgery? Was it in your training in England, that, or was it already there in India when you were?
No, it's again, little bit of my journey has been not straight, in the sense it had a little zigzag lines. It had a little bit of unconventional line, and probably, every time I dream, I always dream, and I was dreaming of, doctor. But when we got into medical school, I wanted to become a surgeon. Some or other thing fascinated me, and I got into surgery. I did surgical training. I got married by that time, and Lalita, we had two kids, Anjali and Amol. I became a surgeon, and in Solapur, like a city, we could practice around that time. There were not many and could help the family. But I wanted to do super specialty. And it struck me either I should become a cardiac surgeon or a urologist. And I think you guys may know around that time, you heard about Dr. Cherian,
Yeah.
Pediatric cardiac surgeon. And some or other way, I may have read in the newspaper, or because that was the only source. Even I didn't read newspapers, probably my dad may have talked about it or other friends. And it somehow inspired me to do super specialty. But the urology came forefront because the kidney transplantation was on the verge then. And I said, if you could give an organ to human being and, give them a new life, this is incredible. So I decided to become a urologist. And it was a hard thing. And I'm really, again, happy that Lalita supported wholeheartedly my parents and my two brothers and whole family. So we have to go to Bombay because the super specialty was not there. And it's very tough to get into urology. So somehow I got into urology. I started doing urology, and things never stopped there. As we were doing urological surgery, and there was an instance that, one of a child we operated, very complex surgery. And the next day, the child recovered, and suddenly it hit me next day saying that, oh, this child could live next 90 to 100 years with these outcomes. What fascinating thing. Means, I really love, adults, elderly. It's just a human being to help, and, to see the interaction and the reflection on them, it is just unparalleled. And I said, wow, now what should I do to do such specialties? So I spoke to my professor, and he said, no, there is no specialty like exists here in India. You have to go to overseas. And I said, what? Now what?
So the field didn't exist at all.
It didn't exist. There was no pediatric urology. So urologists, the pediatric general surgeons, everybody did it. The pediatric urology as a specialty didn't exist at all.
So Mohan, you imagined a field that did not exist. Right? It was not like a field you saw before you. It was you imagined being somebody for which you had no role model, if strictly speaking.
No.
In India, and then made it happen.
Yeah.
Then, there's no, and I'm so grateful again to that professor, Dr. Punjani. He went overseas, spent time, he came back, and he said, there's no specialty exist here. And to train as well, you can't train here. You have to go overseas. I said, this is difficult now. Means what what should we do? What should we think about it? So that's where the birth of pediatric urology happened.
Right.
Professor
So
Gundeti, if
where
I
did you?
may,
Yeah.
I'd like to just bring you to Dipesh Da's earlier question. When you went to England, and we all know what a distinguished, sort of glorious career that you had in England, being associated with Guy's and then St. Thomas's Hospital, which is one of the largest hospitals there. You were at King's College. You were doing research. You were also teaching. There was a lot of pedagogical sort of advances and innovations that you were making, all of that. But I just wanted to know, having spent a few years in England myself, that around the time that you went, culturally, how easy was it for you to acclimatize, and what did that entire culture mean? Because in Britain, unlike in the US, things can be very elitist, at least around the time when you went there.
Yes, Avik. Again, I am fortunate. It didn't happen in that way that I was able to get into these programs and the hospitals. I went as a visiting scholar. I had to get some scholarships, and I'm again indebted to all the scholarship organization. And that's what we talk about next 10 minutes, that, how I want to give back in the same form and how important it is. Because even though I dreamed of, it was not possible in any circumstances to go to overseas because I didn't had an exam. I didn't had any financial capabilities. And I think this is the scholarship we made it happen. And it made it happen because Lalita and my two brothers and my parents said, you go ahead, we are here. And I went as a visiting scholar on my own. And when I started there, I was just as a scholar. I wanted to come back. But then when I wanted to come back, I realized I didn't operate it. I have to operate. I had to learn because I'm a surgeon. And I didn't have exams. And to do exams is very expensive, as you all know, English exams. So somehow I got relief of examinations, and every step I was able to get a 6 months job at a time. There was never a training program I had, and it was every 6 months. And once we got a job, with three children and Lalita, we were moving like every 6 months or a year because we knew what's happening. But again, with all with Almighty's grace and well wishers and people seeing the work, we got into all these great programs in the world. Where the birth of pediatric urology happened is at Great Ormond Street Hospital, and I'm very indebted to colleagues there and people who helped me. Now, one of the things what happened, when you ask me, was it culturally very different? It was indeed, because from Solapur, from Bombay, going to this place, I never saw, even I didn't knew, exactly where England is on the map. To be honest, I never read any books. I never read a newspaper. I never saw television. And if you think about it, how is this guy functioning? Probably, I was just focusing. I'm just reading and writing and studying and doing surgery, seeing patient. It was tough. One, the language, so difficult. Second thing is, about the attributes or the etiquettes we say are so different. And at least, I may have been in the hospital environment where professionals will understand, but Lalita and kids have to be really from, trenches where, the social attributes are so different. But, what it showed is, we are passionate, it showed compassion. And, the way you reflect, sometime, even if you don't put in the words, I think probably the way you present, I think it was all, reciprocable. And that's how, we made it through. And it was a great journey. And it was so helpful for learning what I've learned today. It's just unparalleled.
Mohan, we know that you are a pioneer of robotic surgery on children and babies. Were they already doing robotic surgery, or were you one of the people who invented robotic surgery for urology, for pediatric urology?
So as you said, every time you think about something which is not existent,
Right.
I think you hit hard on that nail on me. It same happened. I was very happy. I got trained, I did the English exams, and actually I wanted to come back to India and establish pediatric urology. But some or other way, it didn't work out. So what happened is in 2005, the Guy's Hospital Foundation, through a charitable organization, bought a robot. And the adult urologists were very forefront around 2002, 2005. And our team said, hey guys, do you want to do some pediatric cases? So back then, my mentor, Patrick Duffy, Imran Mishtak, people say, hey, let's see, we can do some cases. So we did 6 robotic cases in 2005 in Guy's and St. Thomas Hospital.
Yeah, but on grown-ups, on adults.
For children.
On children.
They are, well, not small children. They were like, for us children, like 12, 13, 14 years old, like, teenagers. And I got fascinated. I got really fascinated. I tell you, the minute I sat on the console, I hold that and the movements and the precision, it just sparked some part of my brain. And I said, oh my God, this is just incredible. Now what's next? So 2006 came and we lost the access to robot because our children's hospital moved across Thames River. They said you can't have a robot. Great Ormond Street Hospital didn't have a robot, and I was restless. And I didn't had a firm attending job in England. I was like a ad hoc consultant or attending what you say. I was restless. I was looking for what's next. What can I do in field of pediatric urology? And 2006, 2007, it so happened, one of the professor from United States, I know him very well, and he said, we need you here. We need you here. And, minimal invasive surgery is at the forefront. We need you here. And it so happened, University of Chicago said, all right, we want Dr. Gundeti here. Can we have him interview here? So that is where the birth of robotic surgery begins after 2005.
I see. So you began to do robotic surgery here.
Oh,
sure.
Sorry, go ahead.
Avik, please. Avik, please.
I was wondering, right? The UChicago called you over for an interview, and I'm sure Dipesh won't mind my asking this question. But at that point of time, you're not specialized; you were super specialized already, right? With so many manuscripts, so many publications, and so much of esteem already under your belt. What made you want to come to UChicago and build upon the platform that you already had, and through the rest of your career be in UChicago? Because I'm sure many of the other Ivy League colleges would also have invited you.
Yes, Avik, I think, I was just beginning of the journey of pediatric urology, minimal invasive surgery. And I saw probably, I wanted to just contribute a little bit more in the field and to see, what I can do in this. It was very unknown territory after doing 6 cases. But when I came to University of Chicago for interview, I was fascinated by 2 things. One is people. My section chair, Arya Shalau, and the team at UChicago. And then the visit, how they took me to all the different peoples to meet in different departments, showing the campus, showing all the, your social life, your personal life. And the most important thing is the infrastructure. They had a robot around that time, and the adult urology program was really, forefront around that time. And they said, you come in here and we will provide you all the infrastructure and take it up and see whatever you can do in pediatric urology. And there was no force that, you do minimal invasive surgery or you do this thing. And it was left to me to take the field, to do what you like and what you want to pursue.
Mohan, so how would you describe your own contribution in the field of robotic urological surgery? Do you feel that you've actually, I'm sure you've brought something to the field, to your own intelligence, imagination, commitment? Do you want to give us an impression of that in layperson's terms? I mean, we won't understand very technical. about
Sure,
Avik?
sure. So essentially, for all the viewers, robotic surgery means is an extension of laparoscopic surgery. I think, most people know laparoscopic surgery, where, instead of doing open incision, you make a small incisions, you put small instruments with a camera, you try to work. And that was taken very well. But unfortunately, what happened is when it comes to children, the outcomes were not long sustainable in everybody's hand. Only few people can do it. But also the complex surgeries where, tissue handling, the intricacy, the vision was not that great. So the robotic assistant bridged that gap of whatever the deficiencies we had. And it was just that, the fascination initially, but then as I started using it, saw the limitless potentials of that assistance for complicated surgeries. Started with the very simple things, like a kidney obstruction, grown-up children. But then felt that, can we do a little bit more? Can we push the boundaries? Can we push the envelopes? So then slowly we got it to the smaller age. And to the age that 6 weeks baby, from 6 weeks baby. So that's a push for the age. But then for the complex surgeries, apart from kidney obstruction, then we move to the ureter, which drain the urine from kidney to the bladder. Then doing the bladder reconstructive procedures. And the final pinnacle of the complex surgery is making the bladder big with the intestine. That's the most complex surgery you can accomplish in pediatric urology. So the boundaries got pushed, the complexity got pushed, and again it was just one step at a time. It never I thought, but I was dreaming of, I was thinking about, I was day in day out. What can we do? But at the same time, keeping in mind that very safe application at the
So,
time.
Mohan, can you describe just one incident, say with one of your most challenging cases? Can you describe the human being Mohan Gundeti behind the surgeon, and what kind of emotions? So, what kind of emotions would a surgeon like you undergo while doing the surgery? Would you have any anxieties? Would you have any emotions? How do you deal with all of, you're cutting up a little baby's body, even with a robot, right? Looking inside, you were pushing the boundaries. Uh, just give us some sense in human terms what it means to be you in those
Yeah,
moments.
it's immense pressure. I will say, it's immense pressure, especially when you are doing for first time. It's immense anxiety behind you, and it's a performance. At the same time, it's almost like you have to perform so well that at any stage you cannot afford any turn back or complications. And that amount of sheer pressure is so much on you, but you cannot reflect that, because that gets reflected into your team members, does reflected onto the parents, because when you go down and talk to them. And I can tell you the example of the first complex surgery we did, which we performed first in the pediatric robotic world. um, and I had to talk to families saying that, look, I have done this multiple times in open surgery, but I haven't done in this way. And I will make it sure that I will do my best. And at any time I feel that this is not safe, I'm going to convert that to open surgery, because my main focus is baby, and is your baby is my baby. It is my baby. Every time any child I operate is my child at that time, and I will do that best. And I think the trust what we accomplish in initial that 10 minutes 15 minutes discussion,
Yeah.
after we discuss in outpatient clinic, that takes us to perform, and you do perform it under immense pressure. This is very common, and I think with that immense pressure what happens is your system sets up for a high functioning, and your adrenaline is rushing, your all systems are on alert, and at that time you don't know anything outside your world except you, that patient, and that focus. And I think that's the one thing, I really want, most every surgeon has it, but if you have any breach in there, of that triangle of all those things, then it does reflect in a different form, either in the environment or in the theme or in the patient outcomes. Um, so that's what I can share. It's very difficult to explain, but
No
that's
more. That is very inspiring. It's a very. I was also wondering. So, is your what you do physically, like running, bicycling? I know some of the amazing things you do, the marathon running. Is that to ensure that you have that kind of concentration, the capacity for focus and fitness, so that your own body is no distraction when you're actually doing the surgery?
yes. Again, I will say this didn't happen. Suddenly I became so fitness. Or I want to do this. Medical school. Growing up, residency. You always compete for sleep and compete for food and hunger. Um, so somehow you get over it, residency, training, fellowship, and then your initial career, you're competing for family balance, you are again, developing the practice, developing academic accomplishment. But I think probably just slowly started, playing with children, my kids, going for rides with my team members, and then just doing here and there, but then slowly it became a habit. And as the habit came, you meet again good peoples along the way, like again my section chief Arya, and then my son Amol, and then my two brothers, other friends, and then Lalita. So we slowly started getting into this small running, swimming, tennis with my two daughters Anjali, Apurva. And then what happened is one day it happened, hey, why can't you do half marathon? I said, I never ran 3 miles, I never ran 2 miles, I never ran 1 mile, how can you do it? So, and then, can you do triathlon now that you are biking and swimming? Um, Now I'm realizing all those really helped in regards to sustaining that energy. So I can use that same sustainable energy, but also focus. And now this all happened. Now, if you read about literature, it shows how much the deep neuronal connection you can set it up with exercise, how you can change, the composition of gray matter, white matter, and there is so much of literature. And then the last thing is the cognitive abilities.
Mhm.
The cognitive abilities, the perception to the attention, the reflexes. I think that's how means it kept on going, and now retrospectively thinking, oh, this all really helping me out.
Mohan, you've already addressed one question I had in my mind through your answer, which was really I was going to ask you, how does a busy person like you achieve sort of work-life balance, as it were? But you've already said that, Lalita, your children, I mean, they're involved in these aspects of your life in different ways, and so that's a trick, is to bring them into what
Yes.
you're doing. Mohan,
Yes.
so I'm just looking at the time, and let's say we've got another 10 minutes or so for our conversation, and then we'll open up if people to see if there are any questions or comments from people watching it. One thing I want to ask you, go back to this, is you worked in 3 different countries, in India, England, and do you see differences in institutional cultures, medical cultures, how medicine is practiced? And if the 3 countries came to you and said, what can we learn from each other? What would you say?
I think, if we could think about the practice two pattern, one is the system administration, and second thing is physicians, or, the important key workers. I think the key workers, like, surgeons, the nurses, most of us have compassion and passion. But because of the way the system is running, the way the administration runs, it doesn't allow, to practice full-heartedly or full professionally. And that could be because of, the time constraint, or multiple commitments, being in India, time constraint. We have so much volume and time constraint. I want to talk to family for 15 minutes and explain to them, but sometimes it does not happen. Or if you say in England, I want to see 40 patients, but I want to do 30 surgeries. But because of the national health system, we have constraints of how much capacity, you can use it because we have a limited capacity. And then if you see United States, we can function how we like it, we can compassionate care, but the cost is humongous. And that's because of the the operating cost and the way everything is set it up. I think, we can pick and choose each one of those, like, the low expensive, high level care in India, the very stable, taking care of everybody's health in England without, despite of whatever your affordability. And here, I think, the research and the advancing the field in all the aspect, we do it, but at a cost of financial expenses.
And Mohan, before we finish off, there one more thing is that you sometimes talked about what you want to give back to India and your dreams about your role as an educator worldwide and what you dream about India. Do you want to talk about those things, both your role about as an educator in India and elsewhere, and and I know that you have some dreams about India.
Yes, Dipesh and Avik. I think, with one person, we can touch one life at a time. And but if I can share that of, whatever has been acquired to residents, to fellows across the world, surgeons around the world, in the form of workshops, teaching, lectures, books, then, probably we could reach, multiple times. And that's the main notion of, doing all these things. But giving back to India and rest of the world, apart from education and teaching and sharing the skills, as you saw, the Delhi Center has been so influential to help me out with the grants, so I can do workshops, I can do teaching conferences. Also, we are running, our Gundeti Foundation organization, where we are doing, surgeries and seeing patients every year. We do want to grow that up more so that we can reach to most people in the society. But last thing also of the scholarship, and university has helped us. Some of the philanthropists has helped us. Where through the scholarship, we're getting the developing country young surgeons to come and spend time with us. So in that way, that surgeon, when goes back, he or she can, spread that good knowledge and teaching and the care to people in the need.
And that's what I think sometimes the Delhi Center has been able to.
It has been indeed a
Yeah.
help. Delhi Center and universities philanthropist, and this all has become, and as I said, like, I'm so indebted for not only peoples to organization to mentors and teachers. We thought that it was not possible. So I think if we can everybody reciprocate in 10 times what we have received, I think the world will be a much better place. Planet is beautiful, the world is beautiful, human beings are lively. I think it will be still growing more rich.
Mohan, we're beginning to get some questions or comments.
Dipesh, this particular question, Shubhajit, has already been answered by Professor Gundeti. We have one or two more questions that we can take up, but before that, if I may, I had a few questions of my own. Just maybe one or two more. And I wanted to bring you, because this is something that we really didn't talk about. In the earlier part of the conversation, we talked a little bit about the pandemic and vaccines, etc. So I want to bring you back to this era of the pandemic that we are right now in. And you know much better than me that as a result of the pandemic in the healthcare sector across the board, there's been this incredible proliferation of technology, not just in the field of robotics, but mainly telemedicine across the world, right? And given that we are not out of the woods by any means, that telemedicine, the proliferation of telemedicine is kind of becoming endemic, if I may use that technical word. I wanted to understand from you, what is your own position in this? What are some of the pros and what are some of the cons of telemedicine?
So thank you, Avik. Again, being a distinguished author and a thinker like Dipesh, that every crisis brings something new, and we learn from the crisis, a positive and negative. And the positive has been the technological advancement and the telehealth. Now, we've been thinking about using telehealth, but movement happened, we're using telehealth for outpatient clinics. There are some limitations, because there are some of the physical examination we're not able to do it, but we can overcome those situations by sending some of the equipments to patient's home or to a place, and we can get those data, like simple thing like electrocardiogram. You have application on iPhone now. You can have a blood pressure monitoring, you can have electrocardiogram, and to an extent now the ultrasound scan machines, small portable, will be sent to families, so you can do all those things at home, and we will have a live recordings, and then we can use those for next year of physical examination, which you don't have to come in person. But also, moving on to that, the last means, I always dream about, again, tele-robotic surgery. We've been talking about tele-robotic surgery for the last 20 years since the robotic surgery been here. And I think, that could be the future frontier. And we don't, time is just, just a time gap. But I think if we can have a tele-robotic surgery, then our hospitals will not be loaded, because we have to take care of the pandemic patients. We have to take care of the healthcare resources to the pandemic. So if you have a tele-robotic surgery, which could be the future, then we could overcome some of those situations. But I think it's promising, and we all contributing to it, and will be very helpful in future.
And just staying on that domain of the technological advances or the increasing technological demands, right? If I transpose the question onto medical education itself, how does the pedagogy, how does the methodology, how does the way that you teach things in a practical manner, how does that itself shift as a result of these increasing technological demands?
Again, we have seen a good use of this virtual platform for education. We were able to do all the lectures, CMEs, workshops, and conferences. But what was lacking is the human touch, in the sense of human interaction in one-on-one. And probably when you have human interaction one-on-one, it does allow you to share some of the thoughts which you may not have thought about. And those small thoughts or the some intriguing questions may advance the field. And I think that's the only thing, I think is a little bit, missing, because last 2 years doing all this educational advancement. But at the same time, I was able to, everybody was able to touch the world by educational manner without traveling. So we could reach to different parts of the world. So there are pros and cons. I think it will be part of our future education, but it won't completely replace it.
Mm-hmm. Dipishta, incidentally, Professor Gundeti has also answered a couple of other questions, particularly from Chando, but we have one or two that we can bring up right now. And let's start with the one from Dr. Nayak, Dr. Siddharth Nayak. So we can have that on the screen here. This goes beyond robotic surgery, right? A very, very broad-based question. What, in your vision, is the role of AI going to be in medical practice in future?
Thank you, Siddharth. It's a hard hit and that question in time. So I think, it has a good role in our medicine. And actually, I'm working on a project of using I will say, machine learning. In the end, it's artificial intelligence, but machine learning. And I think currently I'm working on a project to diagnose a condition and to predict the future of that disease process, so we can tell the families upfront when we see them that this is the course of this disease process, based on what we are inputting the data into the machine learning or artificial intelligence. So it has an immense role not only in diagnosis, but it has an immense role to prognosticate and explain the disease process. So we are very well informing the families and patients about their long-term sequelae and the long-term course. It will be complementary. Again, it won't replace it. It will be complementary, because it all depends on how good data we feed into this system. That's what we're going to get out. And it is all on us that, we want to be very careful and very meticulous of using all this data to feed for the machine so we can learn better.
Absolutely. Will We'll take up Tonmoy Bhattacharya. We'll take up Tonmoy's question next. And this is a very interesting one. Hypothetically speaking, and this is not hypothetical, but really practical. Can a surgeon be very objective when you're operating on someone that you know, or maybe it's a loved one?
Yes,
Tough one.
yes, it's a tough one, but it's a real one. It's a real one. And what I say is, you have to develop a process of attachment and detachment. So much attached to family and that child before surgery, but once you start surgery, I don't know what happens, when you scrubbing the hands, getting ready, the gown gets put on, then the gown gets tied off, you start at the bed, the lights are on, and suddenly the detachment begins. And if you are not able to do detachment and be objective and critical, then I think the performance won't happen very well. And I always think, in England, we used to call the operating room as a theater, operation theater. And we had a very fun when I came to United States. I said, we'll take patient for theater. And some of my residents said, theater? Then, they realize it. So it was like always like, it's a performance. And I think that attachment detachment takes a time to develop as well, and especially for young aspiring our future surgeons, we have to develop that, and it does develop over a period of time.
Gundeti, if we've gone past the time, but we are still continuing to see quite a few questions come in. You did mention it, but probably we'll end with this one, which is from Somyadeep, and it's quite apposite that we end with this. You just touched upon the Gundeti Foundation, but here's one of our viewers who wants to know a lot more about it, about giving back to the community through the foundation. So if you can enlighten us.
Sure. Thank you, Somadip. It's mainly our family endeavor at this stage, focusing on health and education. And health in the sense of essentially we are doing for mainly pediatric urology patients. And it's run by all our family and my friends who come and help from different portion of the country, anesthetists, surgeons, pediatricians. And what we are doing is probably it's about 2 to 3 days of work. We do see a number of patients, and do number of surgeries next day. So that's what is mainly currently slowly, it's in the embryonic stage. I think we want to grow. And in regards to the education, essentially focusing on scholarship. So we can help those who are in need to get the education they want. So that's what it has been kind of instrumental in. And we will be growing slowly and slowly on that aspect.
Best wishes.
Mohan, I think if there are no further questions, we've come to the end of the program.
Yes.
Before I thank you, I want to, of course, thank Avik and Anitesh and the Prohor team and the Delhi Center team who work in the background and make all this possible. And Avik, I want to thank especially for being here in spite of not being 100%. And Mohan, it was a great pleasure and honor to have you on this program and to discuss your life's journey and the story. You are a figure of inspiration, I'm sure,
Absolutely.
not just for us,
Thank you.
but everybody watching it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dipesh. Again, I'm really honored, in the gathering of distinguished historians, authors, and poets. Thank you for all the team at Delhi Center, University of Chicago. And again, I want to say a number of people, including my family members and people around the world, not only in England, India, and United States, but around the world. Everybody contributes to, some or other of journey in some or other way. And I'm really grateful for everyone. And thank you. I hope we have a best 22 and the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.